Hello, hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space. And a couple cards using some of the just released products from Simon Says Stamp. Their Cheering for You release, aka the July 2024 release, just went live a couple days ago. I will have a link to that release in the description box below if you want to check out all the products. There are many. They're fabulous. Love. I'm just getting started with the cards and the videos and all the things. Today's video is also part of a blog hop to share inspiration for this release. I will have a link to my blog post in the description box as well. Worth checking out because there's going to be so much inspiration and giveaways and fun things. So check that out below and hop along after you're done watching this video. We're going to do some really easy stencil layering with a background stamp, a little splatter of course, and some fabulous CZ design sentiments because, you know, Kathy just had to come out with more just chef's kiss, fabulous things in this release. So as always, I will have links to all the things I used as well in the description box below. My links are affiliate links. That just means that if you click on one of my links, end up placing an order, I get a little kickback from that. At no extra cost to you. It's what helps pay the bills, keep the channel running, all the things. And let's get into making these cards. So I'm starting off with the Sunflower Pattern Stencil Set. And this is a well, both of them are multi-layer stencils. This one has 5 stencils in the set to build this pattern. And I decided to do all my stenciling on some craft cardstock. This is Neenah Desert Storm cardstock, one of my go-to favorites. If you want more vibrant colors, white cardstock is your friend. Because anything you layer on craft cardstock like this is going to mute the colors significantly. But I've talked about this many, many times. I love how things look on craft cardstock. And that was just the mood I was in, honestly. But you can always experiment too, because, you know, any color of cardstock, you just always have to remember that especially if you're using dye-based inks, which I'm using Simon's Pawsitively saturated inks for this. They are transparent inks. So whatever you're layering them on top of, that will affect, you know, the color, how things look. And it's only paper. So it's fun to kind of experiment and see how things go. So I used a whole bunch of different colors. I ended up like changing my mind partway through and, you know, doing things like that. I was just having fun with it, but I will have all the colors that I used listed with the supplies. And I also used like 3 different types of blending brushes for a very simple, in the sense, this was a simple card and simple stenciling. I was just grabbing things at random, you know, that's what we do. So I just kept building up these layers and the colors with all these different stencils, you know, using sometimes more than one color per stencil, depending on, you know, what part of the pattern I was working on. And yeah, I've also talked about this. I love layering stencils, whether it's ones like this that, you know, build a pattern, you know, it's just a standalone stencil set, or ones that are, you know, meant to layer over stamped images to color them in, anything like that. It's satisfying. And it's also just somewhat mindless, you know, like once you kind of got your colors planned out, things like that, you don't have to worry too much about anything else, in my opinion. You just sit and stencil, and then you peel the stencil off and you've got this fun pattern or a colored in image. And I'm like, I did that. I don't know. I love it. So I was also working on, so this is the finished like sunflower pattern. Love it. It makes me think of tile. Could you imagine having tiles, especially like with like a craft sort of background? They'd be amazing. Amazing. Anyway, I'm working on one of my big grip mats here. This is the Altenew one this time. They're all fabulous. People ask me like which one I recommend. Any of them. They're all great. They're all, you know, made by great little craft companies. I switch between all the different ones. You don't need every grip mat. I have a bunch of them because I do this as a job, and they're all wonderful. Anyway, the second stencil set, this is the Monstera stencil set, and I really like this one. This was an A2 size, so I ended up needing tape to hold it to my mat, which was fine. And you could use pixie spray depending on what you're blending with and what you're doing, because there are a lot of like elements on these stencils that, you know, aren't attached other than in one spot so they can move. And I can't show this on camera. You can't see the pressure I'm using, but I was using a very light hand, especially with that first layer, because all those little, inner bits where it could move around. But you could eliminate that by just using a bit of pixie spray. I didn't feel a need for it. I just used a really light hand with my brushes, and I would kind of move the brushes more in like sort of a dragging motion instead of swirling it. And then I would, I wasn't worried about getting like a perfect blend, because these inks smooth out as they dry. They soften, they soak in, they smooth out. And that's also why I've been like loving stenciling more and more, is all the inks we have now. They just make everything effortless. It's all done for us. I loves it. So layered up this one, and look at it. The pattern on it. Also, I love Monsteras. They're just, the bigger the better, So did all my stenciling on both of these, but I'm going to add more to it. I want more texture. I want more things going on. So I'm going to put these in my Misty, and I'm going to stamp the old letter background stamp. This is also from this new release on top of it. You could stamp a background first. I've done kind of either or, it just depends on my mood, really, because it doesn't really matter. But yeah, any sort of like text background works, and some patterns would work as well. It just kind of depends. I find ones that are a little kind of lighter and finer, not super solid type, really busy patterns, just add an extra something. So I'm stamping that old letter background onto these stenciled backgrounds using fawn ink. So this will also soften and dry back and just be just there, so it looks a little more intense when I first stamp it, but as the ink dries back, it'll just kind of soften and become, part of the pattern, part of the background. So I stamped that onto both of these panels, and then of course I'm going to add splatter. So I finally got my hands on this Spellbinders opaque splatter white opaque watercolor. I had so many of you asking me, what my thoughts were on this. It kept selling out. I finally was able to get it added to my cart. Just recently got it. First time using it. I can say as a first impression, love it. Like, it stayed white. Even like a lot of times when you splatter on top of anything that is water reactive, which Simon's Pawsitively saturated inks are water reactive, a lot of times when you add like a white splatter on top, it'll start to absorb those water reactive inks and change color. As of right now, this one didn't, like on top of these panels. I'll need to play with it more. Like I said, my first impression, it's amazing. I need more time to play with it, but yeah. Can't go wrong with a good white splatter. So anyway, splattered that onto both those backgrounds. I'd added a little bit of water to it, used my fan brush. We're good to go. Set those aside to dry. While that splatter was drying, I started my die cutting, and I'm using the CZ design, the new You Wafer Die. It's got the word and the outline, and I was just using my little scout machine, because when I'm doing like multiple die cuts, like of small die cuts like this, that's where just the little die cut machine just comes in handy. It's faster. So I die cut all my layers, and I just die cut scraps of Simon's green leaf cardstock for the words. And then the outline I had just die cut from vellum. And then I took two of the die cut words, and I'm blending, this is Simon's Field Pawsitively saturated ink. And I'm just blending it on the bottoms of two of these words and just letting it kind of fade towards the top. So it'll give it a little bit of an ombre look. It'll also just give the die cut word a little more depth, a little more definition. And then after I did that, I'm going to stack these together as is the rules, dimension of life. It's true. It just gives it, again, that extra lift. So I'm adhering two die cut words together and then topping it with one of the ones that I had blended the ink on. And then I'm going to adhere this to the vellum outline just using my craft tacky glue. I don't need to do any special like tips or tricks this time anyway to like pop things up, add a die cut behind the vellum. If you watch a lot of my videos, you know what I'm talking about. With this one, it's pretty basic because it's a chunky sentiment, which I love. So I did all of that. And then I grabbed a piece of white cardstock, and I'm using the coordinating stamp set. And I grabbed a couple sentiments from this set, and I'm going to stamp them onto the cardstock with that same field ink, so that I've got, a couple little phrases to build the sentiments on the front of my cards. So once I got those stamped, I pulled out my oldie but goodie favorite, the Sentiment Labels wafer dies. I have 2 of them. I purchased a second set of these. This set's been out for years, these Sentiment Label sets. And it's one that I use so often that for me it was worth purchasing a second set, because then I can do things like this. It's worth it. For me anyway. So I took the narrowest Sentiment Labels wafer dies, taped them into place, and then I'm going to die cut these little sentiments. I'm going to remove them from the wafer dies and then shift them in the die so that I can die cut the other side, because it gives it that little bit of a pressure edge. You can also use your paper trimmer. Again, it just kind of depends on my mood, what I decide to do. But since I have both wafer dies and everything's just sitting here, I just shifted the die cut piece over so it die cuts the other side. Again, just making sure everything was taped in place so it doesn't shift when I run it through the machine. And then I've got my little companion sentiments. And now the splatter is dry, so I can trim down these panels. They originally were A2 sized, and I cut like 1/4 inch off each side, so they ended up being like 3 3/4 by 5, so smaller than an A2 card front, so that the card will kind of frame out these panels. And speaking of the cards, the card bases are top folding A2 white note cards, so 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I took the large U sentiment from the stamp set. And with new stamps, and especially stamps with large solid areas like a sentiment like this, I rub them with my fingers. Altenew also has a little like stamp conditioning eraser. That works great too. That just helps condition new stamps so that they stamp a bit better, because when they're brand new from the manufacturing process, you'll notice your inks will bead up on them. So just try rubbing it with your fingers. Or just stamp it multiple times on scratch paper, wipe them off. That also conditions them, and they take ink better. And then the other thing I did was use my large blending brush, because I was using that same field green ink, but I didn't want it super intense. So using the brush just softened it. So I inked it up with the brush. And then that way it's not so intense, but the color is there. And then I could stamp one of the companion sentiments to finish the phrase right on top of it, because I just thought that would look cool. And I inked that up with VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. Stamped that on the inside. And then I decided to trim down a couple of green panels of that same green cardstock to slightly larger than my stenciled panels, just to frame it out a little bit, bring in more of that green, because this is one of my favorite shades of green. And once I got those layered together, I can add my die cut sentiment. And again, since it's a nice chunky sentiment, I don't have to like fiddle. Just add a bit of glue behind it, because glue shows through vellum. I don't care what anything says, glue shows through vellum. It just does. I've tried it all. Never found anything that doesn't show, unless you completely coat the vellum edge to edge. Done videos on that too. Not my favorite thing to do. Anyway, adhered the sentiment into place, adhered the little companion, finishing off the sentiment with some thin little foam squares. And then I put Big Mama foam tape on the back of these panels, popped them onto each of their card bases. And then my final little bit of embellishment is the new Garden Blooms embellishment mix. The colors were perfect because they're like greens and yellows. So I put greens and yellows on the sunflower one, and then just the green confetti on the Monstera one. Once I was happy with the placement, going to adhere these into place with little dabs of craft tacky glue. And then I just got to let the glue dry, and these cards were complete. So I've got sunflowers and Monstera and splatter and a fun little kind of old letter, background there. And you can see the ink has now like dried more. So it's not so in your face. It's just more part of the pattern, part of the background. So like I mentioned in the intro, I'll have links to all the things in the description box below the video. You just got to expand the description box. It'll all be there, along with a link to my blog post, the new release. All of that will be below. Thank you all so very much for watching, and I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye. Thank you so much to my amazing Patreon supporters. For anyone that might be interested in supporting me over on Patreon, the link to that is in the description box below the video. For everyone else, as always, thank you all so much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you. And here's a couple other videos for you to check out in case you missed them. Bye.